Hey guys, I'm Dan, and I just turned 30. I made it through my 20s, and my reward is, unfortunately, I remember my 20s. What I'd like to share with you guys are the lessons I learned from all the times I lied and cheated and got into jams and jackpots. My first foray into adulthood wasn't a super sweet 16, it wasn't a bar mitzvah, it wasn't a bat mitzvah, it wasn't a quinceañera. It was running to college when I was 18. And it was this chance finally to reinvent myself. And I got out of the city, I got away from my family, from high school, from my high school friends. And I left this Dan, this guy who was taking attendance-based classes in high school and failing them. Who'd drink 40s in the park with his friends, and who couldn't tell a girl that he liked her until the last possible moment they would see each other. So the first change was I got rid of the NY, right? I went from Danny to Dan. And instead of 40s in the park, it was more connoisseurship with Vicodin and Xanax, and instead of taking attendance-based classes, I took participation-based classes, and I got C's. There were no tests, but I was doing better. This was coming up, that was coming up, and I got a girlfriend. I got this, and she was perfect. She had a driver's license. It was so impressive to me, coming from New York. And one thing about the school I went to was drinking was very common. A few people smoked weed, and very few people did the kind of pharmaceutical research I was doing. And there was one guy named Morgan, real name, and none of my real friends there knew that I was would hang out with Morgan and never see him. And Morgan had this brilliant idea of ordering 200 Xanax from Belarus to his dorm room. And immediately the Maryland college was suspicious, and his room got raided very quickly. After I had traded some of my own drugs with his drugs, and so his room got raided, and I was scared. So what I did is I cleared my room of everything. I basically just emptied the shoebox, right? The shoebox just didn't have anything. And I eventually did, within 2 days, I was in front of the assistant dean of the school, Dean Kronsberg, real name, and she read this list. And her tone was not supportive or sympathetic. It was very accusatory, and she read and she said, "Did you trade these drugs? Did you bring these drugs down from New York?" And I was like, and I'm 18 years old, and it's my first real test. And I think, and I just say, I go, what? I'm just shocked and surprised and angry that Morgan said, what did he say? She reads it again. I don't know why he said that. So you didn't do this, Dan? No. I think what happened was I intimidated him. We were at a party, or I was walking. It was a Friday or a Saturday, and I told him, and I said, Morgan, if you word is that you're doing some shady stuff with drug. You're bringing drugs onto campus, and if I find out that that's true, I am beholden to the school's code of ethics. I have to report this. And he was scared and scampered away. I told her this, and her face didn't change at all. She, I think, had been lied to by other 18-year-olds. She just saw through it. She goes, okay, we're going to search your room, which was fine, but then I remembered I kept the shoebox. And all I could think of was I still had the shoebox that maybe smelled like weed. And she goes, well, if you don't have anything else to say, we're going to search your room. And I'm sitting there, and my argument was an ethical argument. It was a character argument that I am a good person, I am the ideal student. She said, why didn't you investigate him if you thought this was going on and you had confronted him? And I said, I was studying. I break down because it's 2 minutes of just silence, of someone saying, do you have anything else to say? And just quiet. And then what am I going to say? No, it just would have looked stupid. And I tell her everything, and she just writes it down, still not giving me any sympathy. And she writes it down. And I eventually, and within a week, I'm expelled. Right? It's like my first foray into adulthood, and I hit this brick wall. So what did we learn? Well, since then I've learned that smells are not really admissible evidence, right? I should have just let her search the room. Morgan told everything immediately, and he said everything in detail. So only trade or buy drugs from people you really trust, friends, family. And do not confess. If I had just kept my mouth shut, if I had just said nothing or stuck with the story, maybe I wouldn't have been expelled. But I move on, the sun goes down, sun comes up, and I'm in a relationship. I'm dating this girl. And one of the things that keeps going through my mind is that she had a history, and so did I. And it wasn't like we were sitting in a room eating crackers, waiting for each other. And she had slept with this guy named Nick, real name, who's a jerk. And you have to take my word for that, because he's not here. He was just like a kind of a scumbag, and as the relationship deteriorated, right, as we instead of got closer together, we just learned to fight better, and we would have these screaming fights in apartments and dorm rooms on West 29th Street, and just one of those couples, and eventually, one of us, yelling at the other, yelling about absolutely nothing. One of us would yell well, that's it, I can't do this anymore, I'm leaving, and would walk away, and then the other person would just compromise, right? That's DEFCON 1. And that was our conflict resolution. But that just became a move between us. So and she gets diagnosed with HPV, which I've done a little bit more research. Guess what? You guys all have HPV. It's so common. It's just everybody has it. But it was 2012, and she's like, Dan, I know you gave it to me. And it's there's no male test for it either. So I think Nick gave it to you. She goes, no, Dan, I slept with him with a condom. And I go, you sure? Because it was 18 months ago. She's like, Dan, I'm not talking about it anymore. So then we couldn't even talk about that. It was just Dan, and I got to get my own move, right? I need a new move in this argument, because this is not a good argument to be losing. And they say don't go to bed angry, so I didn't. I stayed up, and I logged into her Facebook, which had been saved on my computer. And I went through I found Nick, and I went through their messages looking for some kind of smoking gun, some kind of can't wait to hit it raw again. Nothing. Surprisingly nothing. He covers his tracks, and so what I did is I logged into my own Facebook and sent him a message, and it was like, hey, dude, sorry to, just got like a small question, and I ask him, and he just says like, ha, trust your girl, which is not no. It's not a no. It's assumed, and I just feel gross, and I feel so shameful, and this is like a thing. Like I didn't date someone to like log into their social media. And the worst case scenario is that he tells her. Then Nick has the upper hand here, which he probably already does. So I tell her, and I say, hey, I did something pretty gross, and this is the only time I'm ever going to do that. This is never going to happen again. And she says, I just don't even recognize you anymore. I'm leaving. I'm out. And she leaves for the last time. That's it. So what did we learn? Well, HPV is very manageable. Nick sucks. And I can't say this enough. Do not confess. There was no way Nick was gonna like message her about this. He didn't give a shit. Without the relationship, I have more energy and I can concentrate on my job, which is good because I'm not doing a great job. I'm working for a family company, and I'm a personal assistant, and my errand list just keeps getting like shorter because I keep messing up. I just don't do that anymore, right? And whenever somebody else does my big job, which is the Friday night car wash, when somebody else does it, they do it faster than I do. And I'm asked, like, Dan, why did it take Anthony 30 minutes to do it, and it always takes you 40? And I go, I don't know why. So it's the next Friday, and I'm stressed out, so I'm trying to relax. So I'm listening to like rap music, right? And it's like this overproduced, luxurious like rap, and it's these guys who are also driving BMWs, right? It was a nice car. It was probably $60,000 to $80,000 depending on the trim package. I made $12,000 that year before taxes. So I can't really, and it's this whole thing where I have no like self-esteem, but I'm in this. I'm working on Park Avenue, and I'm driving this like really nice car, and I just don't feel like worthy of any of it. So I have and the rappers seem to be enjoying their parties. So I was trying to like get some of that. I was gaslighting myself, if anybody's familiar with the term. And it's only for like a couple blocks, but it's really bumper to bumper. And this is really, I'm being timed. I'm really nervous. And I go, and this like painter's van, this kind of like handyman van, it's like, it's all like beat up, and it like edges in, and it's going into Dan's lane. And so it's this, and it's just like, do you not know who this is, who's driving? It's Dan. And I don't let him in, and he's like stops, and it's this great victory, and I make that green light, and then I make the next 10, and the street lights on First Avenue are progressive, so my next red light is 79th Street, right? It's like in like 16 blocks, and I stop, and I go, did I hear a ding? Because there's this voice that's maybe something's gonna like blow up, or like the worst fears, right, just come in, and I'm like, and this doesn't seem like a manufactured. This sounds like I might have heard something. And I get out and I see, and there's a dent, and it's a little bigger than my hand, and pretty visible, right? And I get the car washed and the interior vacuumed, and I bring it back, and I'm shaking and I'm crying, and I don't know what to do. This is another point where I just don't know what to do. I don't know what comes next now. And I called my friend who had wrecked his dad's car when he was a teenager, and I asked him what to say, and he says, Dan, just say you were in a hit and run, that the car just didn't stop, just kept going, and so you didn't get any information. And that is close enough to the truth that I was able to like say that. And I say it, and my voice is like kind of wavering and quivering. That's a new word I just invented, quavering. And I say it, and then I get the question of well, why didn't you make a police report? Why didn't you call the police? And the answer was, I didn't know you're supposed to do that every time. But I just said, I don't know why. And that job also leaves. I leave that job. So big change now. What did we learn? We learned, well, first of all, if there's ever a collision or an accident, contact the authorities, make a police report. That's like number one. Number two is, if you, let's say, can't afford a car accident, try really hard not to get into a car accident. But I didn't confess this time, which is a victory, but it's so hollow because I lost the job, and it didn't really matter what I said at that point. Things were just going to keep getting worse. And luckily that was 6 years ago. I was 24. And what I had to stop doing was I had to stop trying to lie better. And instead I can sleep better. And the Dan who's now just turned 30 probably merits some whittling and some polishing, but it in no way needs that overhaul from when I went from teenagedom to adulthood. And that's everything I learned in my 20s. Thanks, guys.